Welcome to another edition of the Best Business Minds, where we interview business leaders and academics who write thought-provoking books. I'm Mark Kramer, a serial entrepreneur who consults with family businesses and entrepreneurs. And currently, I'm teaching entrepreneurship at Vinh University in Hanoi, Vietnam. Today, please welcome Marley Major, author of the book, But Are You Making Any Money? Stop Being Busy and Start Creating Cash. Marley, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I can't even tell you.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you here. And so let's start off with you telling us about your professional journey. How did you get to where you're at right now?
Well, you need 9 other podcasts. But the net is that I grew up in Pasadena, California, in a very kind of like sheltered environment, let's just say. And I ended up going to Georgetown. Nobody knows how. I went to the business school at Georgetown, but at the time they were looking for girls or women who had demonstrated business ability. Well, I had started my first business, I think at 4, selling shrinky dinks door to door. I'd had a business, many businesses for as long as I can remember. And so wrote my first book on gift wrapping at 13. And so I think Georgetown was like, okay, this is a good start. So I got in. But then once I was there, I realized, I mean, at the time I had very bad ADHD. I had no clue. And I just struggled so much. I mean, I just remembered all I did was study, which was ironic because I loved business, but it was just so hard for me. So I had a pivotal moment. I had gone to cooking school the summer before my junior year at Georgetown in Paris. And I decided, I didn't have anything really that interesting to do. So I was going to go to cooking school and get a French tutor. And I did that, came back. And then for one of my business classes, I had to do this speech on what I knew more about than anybody else. And at Georgia, I was like, I said to my mom, I said, there's nothing that I know. I mean, I'm not even keeping my head above water. She said, why don't you do it on French cooking? There's no way they know more about that. So I said, great. So I ran into my professor and I told her I was doing this on French cooking. And she was like, and I said, and I have an interview with the chef from 1789. Well, 1789 is this very like fancy old school restaurant in DC. I did not have an interview with that chef. And she was like, it's my favorite restaurant. So all I can think of is I'm going to get kicked out of school for lying about this, my sources. My roommate said, don't worry, I'll introduce you to him. They have this new chef from New York. So here I am, a junior, the first couple weeks of school. I go to 1789 down in the basement of this kitchen, and I take one look at the guy and I decide I need to marry him. And I was 19, he was 20 years older than I was. And the whole time I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to interview him, but then how I'm going to marry him, or at least how I'm going to get back to see him, because I knew I'd never see him again since he's working in this basement. And I noticed he didn't speak Spanish that well. I did speak Spanish, and I thought I'll be getting a lot better. And they had souffles on the menu, and souffles are notoriously difficult for a restaurant to do. And I had just spent the summer making souffles. So I thought, okay, I'm going to position myself as a Spanish speaking, souffle wizard. And I did the interview, and then I convinced him I needed to shadow him for, another time. And he was like, why, whatever. He let me do it. And then I just kept saying I wanted a job there. Well, my whole junior year, I got out of class at 2:30, and then 3 days a week, 3:30 to 11:30, I worked in the kitchen, and my parents were mortified. But remember, I'm trying to get married. So he never asked me out. So now, end of my junior year, I go to Normandy my senior year for cooking school, and I plot the whole, because, women and scorned women. So I plot the whole summer about how I'm going to ruin his life, because by now I'm his best employee, right? I mean, I'm his translator, I'm his souffle chef. I pick up every shift. So I go back my senior year, and I'm like, well, I'm too busy with my senior year, and I quit. And he asked me out, and I got engaged the month after graduation. So that started me in the food business. And I was supposed to go to New York and go to work for Gray Advertising. And instead I pivoted and got married to a chef. And then if you ever want to see a chef that's your husband, you get into the restaurant business. So my parents by then had accepted he was 20 years old. I never even had a boyfriend. Now I'm telling them we need to buy a restaurant. So then that was a slippery slope. Got into the restaurant business, started a catering company, started my event planning company, The Party Goddess, wrote a business book to solve my own problems, of which there were many. And that's the very short version.
And you picked the hardest business in the world to get into.
Yeah,
Like if
typical.
you,
I mean,
you
it's
had to
so
pick that,
typical.
if you're going to pick a fight,
Yeah.
that's not the fight to go pick because that's like a 90% failure
Yeah,
rate.
you are correct. And in a lot of ways, I did fail because I ended up getting divorced. I mean, it's a bloody and gory story. However, the best part about it was we were constantly, because we owned the land of the restaurant, we were constantly getting offers to partner up because we owned the land and we had the parking. And that was huge, especially in Pasadena, because Pasadena is very funny about parking structures. It's kind of this weird thing. And so when we partnered, when we cut this deal to partner up, I was still going to get to be the landlord and the business partner, right? So we partnered up with this very successful group that had, multiple restaurants and track records and all this stuff. So I was devastated because my ego was obviously like, I can't do it. But to this day, it has turned out to be, I mean, it's a cash cow. So it has been the best business decision my family or I ever made. So I guess in a lot of ways, I failed miserably. And then now I'm kind of laughing to all the way to the bank. But yeah, it was not the smartest move.
Was your family in business as well?
Uh, Sort of. So my dad is a physician, but he's a gastroenterologist. But he was for as long as I can remember. I mean, when the first workers' comp doctor started, he was one of the first workers' comp doctors, and he started labs and all this other kind of very entrepreneurial stuff within his medical practice. And when he needed a new office, he was like, "Marley, go find us a building. I don't want to pay rent." So I'd find the worst building, rehab it, and then that'd be our office, and then we'd rent it out. And it was sort of, I was always kind of in business with him in all these different things. And he's to this day is 92 years old, still has 8 offices, still workers comp,
Wow.
till the cows, like he's obsessed with it. There's a new trend here in California called Valley Fever that all these people in Central California are getting. And I laugh because I remember a few years ago, he was telling me about Valley Fever and was the next big thing. And he was going to do a webinar on it. And I was just like, yeah, okay. But yeah, so he was always just business, 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 find a need and fill it, find a hole and fill it. I mean, that's all closed mouth doesn't get fed. Like that's what I learned growing up constantly.
Before we jump into the book, you have a lot of celebrity clients like Sofia
Yes.
Vergara and Pierce Brosnan.
Yes.
And you're in California,
Yes.
most competitive place in the world to go get these people.
Once
Everybody's
again.
trying to get them as clients.
Right.
How did you manage to get them and keep them as clients? What was your process for doing that?
Well, first I thought, just like I did when I was trying to, get a job in the restaurant when had no business doing it. I thought to myself, okay, I'm in one of the most competitive markets in the world. Los Angeles, New York, London are kind of the top. And I thought, and at the time there were like 486,000 English speaking event planners. So it was something ridiculous because there are no barriers to entry. There really still aren't. And I thought, how am I going to differentiate myself? I mean, yeah, I'm good at what I do. So are a lot of people. But I kept thinking of like that whole thing of when the tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it, like, did it really fall? And so it's kind of like I can be amazing, but if nobody knows it, it's not going to matter. So I remember in high school, we'd come back or it'd be spring break and you have all the magazines and stuff and we'd all lay out for spring break. And these girls, my friends that I grew up with who had more money than any of these celebrities, right? I mean, they were just gazillionaires themselves. But everybody was always reading these magazines and being like, oh, this celebrity's wearing these jeans. They're using this makeup. And that kind of always continued. And so I thought to myself, well, I got to get me some celebrities. Like, I don't know how I'm going to do it. I had some celebrities that had come in the restaurant or customers. So I was like, but I need a strategy. And so I'm big on goal setting and putting it out there. So I would say to my friends, listen, I need to get some celebrity clients. They're like, well, how? I was like, I don't know. One friend said to me, listen, I have a friend who's a fashion publicist and she doesn't do like event publicity or anything, but she's got all these celebrities. And she sends these gift baskets basically, which is, how they used to do it, where they'd send the clothes to, I mean, I guess they kind of still do, kind of like what gifting suites are now. And they'd send this clothes to celebrities and they'd hope the celebrities would wear them and then get photographed and they'd be in Us Weekly, et cetera. So I was like, well, okay. So I talked to her. She said, well, we do fashion, but if you want, I'll put some kind of like gift certificate or something in these baskets. And I was like, okay. She's like, but it needs to look amazing and it needs to be amazing. So I was like, okay. So we custom printed these, like, they are still the most gorgeous things you've ever seen. It was like a book, really. It was like Dupioni silk and beautiful French ribbon and all this stuff. And you open it up and it had the celebrity's name. And then we gifted them a certain amount towards an event. And I was like, okay, I mean, whatever. My phone totally started ringing. I couldn't believe it. I remember one time being in my office, like sitting on the floor, I don't know, putting invitations together. And the girls in the office were like, Jamie Spears is on the phone. And I was like, what? And that was Britney's dad who had the conservatorship, and I was like, wait, it's like, yes, just a minute. Help, hello. And I got Britney Spears as a client. And then I got, then it's like once you get one,
Right.
then it's like anything else. You get one, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, the celebrity party planner to the stars. Like I had a book, my publicist would try to pitch me for TV shows. Forget it. The second I had a celebrity, it was all of a sudden like now I knew what I was doing. And now I was worth talking to, which is a whole other conversation, right? But it was a strategy. And then once, as I say, once you get them, then they're comfortable, right? Because they know that you can keep your mouth shut. You're not going to sell them out.
Right.
Or if you do, you're not going to be here around very long. And I just knew that if I wanted to stay competitive, I needed those celebrities it was a win-win, right?
No question about it. So let's jump into your book.
Yeah.
What are the most common financial challenges entrepreneurs face when they feel busy as a bee, but their business feels chaotic?
Well, everybody, the reason I said busy as a bee in the beginning was because have you ever asked anybody if you say, "Hey, how are you?" It doesn't matter who, the answer is always the same. Oh, busy, just, really busy. And so I'd always be like, busy freaking doing what? Right? Because the
Yeah.
more entrepreneurs or small business people I would talk to, it was like big hat, no cattle, right? The car was leased, the house was leased,
Yeah.
and I just thought this is nuts. But what I realized is somebody goes into business or starts a business because they love what they do. They love cupcakes. They love beauty. They love, or they're, solving a problem that they had. They don't go into business because I love numbers and I want to crunch them. And I also want to figure out how to change the toner in my printer at the same time while being head of HR. It doesn't work that way. But you blindly go in, kind of like motherhood, and think, oh, this will be fine. I'll figure it out. And what you realize is you start baking cookies or cupcakes, all of us, for the most part, undercharge, right? So you undercharge, you get tons of business. Guess what? Now you're very busy with the wrong clients. And then there it goes. And now you're in the waves. It's like a riptide. You can't get out. And you've got to take the time to stop and say, wait a second. What are my cost of goods sold? Where am I spending my time? But you just keep getting taken away further and further from any kind of pricing model, any kind of realistic business decision that's not emotion based, right? And then after a couple of years, you realize, wow, I'm not making any money. My significant other is saying, why don't you go back to corporate America? At least you weren't such a witch, or at least you didn't forget to pick the kids up, or, at least we had dinner on the table, because you're not making any money. And the title came about because my dad, I was saying one time about, oh, this fabulous event I was doing. And he's like, but are you making any money? He was like,
Yeah.
if you want to, if you want to have a fabulous hobby and you want to be a philanthropist or whatever, knock yourself out. But don't pretend to be in business. And how much are you making? And how much did you make last month? And how much? And when you start getting into those questions, you have to realize, do I want to have a hobby, or do I want to have a business? But those are not fun conversations to have, especially when you realize how much time you've been wasting, let's say, with the wrong customers or leaving money on the table.
Yeah. I always talk to entrepreneurs. And you always hear business development people say about how they're talking to these people, but are you closing the deal? I
Exactly.
mean, yeah,
Right.
it's okay if they say no, just go on and
Right.
move off. We're not going to shoot you for them saying no.
Right.
We just don't want you to waste any time with people who are keeping you on a string and they're not moving forward.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And we miss that. We entrepreneurs, we especially in the beginning, we put so much into it. And it's like we want to tell people, but you don't understand how much time goes into it. You don't understand. If they don't, it doesn't matter. You're either solving the problem for them that they need solved, and you're going to solve it better than anybody else, and you're going to make it easy for them, or forget it. But it's not fun to go from doing what you love to now let's see and let's run some Excel spreadsheets.
I can't tell how many times I've started ventures that look like very promising. I had one in the financial services area, called Funding Organizer. It's a common app for commercial loan officers. Instead of taking 4 to 8 weeks, it takes less than a day to collect all the information.
Mm-hmm.
And we built it because I work with loan officers, but we didn't ask the chief lending officers and the CEOs of the banks, would they agree to use it? And so I tell my students the lesson learned here was go to the people before you build it and say, I don't want to build something you don't want to pay for.
Right.
So if you're willing to pay for it, we'll have you beta tested first,
Right.
and then that's our expectation. But if you say, I'll never use this thing, you're doing me a favor by telling me that's not what that, no matter what kind of problem I think I'm solving, you're just not interested in solving it. I just move on
Yep.
to something else.
Well,
Um,
and I always say that we build our businesses backwards, right? We build our business based on what we're good at or what we think people want instead of exactly what you're saying. Like, but is that what like it, and they're often it's like, no, solve this problem over here.
Yeah, I don't, a lot of people tell young entrepreneurs, go interview 100 people. No, go interview people that you think will actually buy what you're selling and
Exactly.
and ask them, will they buy it? And if
Yes.
not, you don't even need to talk to 100 people. After you've
No.
talked to between 10 and 25 people, you got your answer.
Yeah.
You
You
don't
know
need to
very
talk to 100.
quickly.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
very
Uh,
quickly.
how can business owners start to organize their finances when everything feels overwhelming?
Well, it does feel overwhelming, and I want to validate that because, and I also want to say it's pretty much always going to feel overwhelming. I don't care what kind of staff you have. I don't care how big you get. I don't care who's doing what for you. It's always going to feel overwhelming. I think for a few reasons. If it doesn't feel overwhelming, you're not shooting high enough, right? You're if you're not kind of always feeling like you're up against this learning curve of, oh, wow, I've got so much more to learn. So what I say is that's when you just stop. And my dad would always tell me when he had an issue with his business, he would say, I'm going back to the basics and I'm going to start signing every check. And what he meant by that was I'm going to see you know, the phone bill invoice and I'm going to sign the check for it. And of course, these days it's electronic, but you get the point. It's like, I'm going to see this consultant's bill. I'm going to sign it because guess what? As soon as you start digging into anything, you start, oh, wow. And that shows you your path. So I would say the easiest place for everybody to start is with your subscriptions. Everybody who does that will make money just from listening to this podcast. Go to your credit cards, your debit cards, PayPal, however you pay for things, and just look at your monthly subscriptions and ask yourself, are there any of these that you could cut, or could you even pause for a few months and decide if you need them, right? Do you need every single subscription that you signed up for free, thought you were going to use it, 30 days later you didn't, now they're charging you, blah, blah, blah. So that's to me the easiest place to start. And then you get a little wind under your wings and it starts to get addictive. You're like, wait a second. What's that charge? What's that charge? And then it's off to the races. I mean, then you start calling Verizon and saying, hey, listen, I need a cut on my rate. Do you have any specials going? That was like one of the highlights of my career when I did that. And they were like, oh, we don't want to lose you as a customer. I was like, see me, just because I'm asking you to like lower the rate, you're going to lower it. Well, yeah, because their
Uh,
customer acquisition cost is so much higher.
You're 100% right. I once ran a group of magazines, and I found that our staff was spending $5,000 in subscriptions, some of them duplicates, so they didn't have to
Yeah,
carry the magazine with them. And
exactly.
I got rid of all of it except down to $200.
Yes, it's amazing, right? And then, by the
Yeah.
way, it's with all those subscriptions. I bet if you said, "Hey, listen, we're in the media, we're in the blah 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 blah. Can you send us your magazine for?" They'd probably be like,
Yeah.
"Sure," and they'd send you 5 copies of it. You know?
100%. You're absolutely right. How important is having a detailed business plan for financial success, and what are the key elements it should include?
Well, this is to me a controversial topic, right? Because some people say, "I didn't have a business plan and I made $1 billion." And other people say, "Listen, I had a very detailed business plan and oh, I didn't use it." Okay. So there are a lot of schools of thought on it. I will say I've done it both ways. I think to me, the purpose of a business plan, especially for new entrepreneurs, is to focus your attention to really drill down and really get that 360-degree view of what does the market really want? How big, what's the size of the market? What's the size of the market I could serve? Who are the competitors? It forces you to ask a lot of questions. And even with businesses that I've had or have that are very successful, I'm always, when I kind of go through that drill of the business plan of, who's my target audience? Who's my competition? Again, how big is the market? Because, a lot of people say the riches are in the niches. Well, okay, if the niche is significant enough and if that niche actually spends money. So I think it's more the exercise of the business plan, because I think we get as entrepreneurs very very focused on this is our idea, it's going to work, so now we're just going to almost get all this evidence to show that it's going to work. And listen, it very well might work, but you do yourself such a disservice not to poke and prod and try to get people to dismantle your whole idea, because then that has you thinking strategically, right? It's kind of like in speech and debate when you somebody says something and then you realize, if you knew that ahead of time, you could inoculate the argument. So in this case, it's sort of, oh, somebody says, well, how is that going to work? And you realize, okay, you have a solution, but what you realize is maybe you better lead with that solution because every venture capital firm is going to want to know the answer. So I do think it's important and it's helpful. I don't think it's essential.
Yeah, I think I've written over 200 plans for other people, and I've written
Mm-hmm.
plans for everything I've done. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's what you said, it's the process, because
Mm-hmm.
when you write everything down and you see it in
Yes.
front of you, it becomes real and you're able to
Yes.
make better decisions
Totally.
from it, as opposed to flying by the seat of your pants.
Right.
Uh, and guessing at this stuff. So I think it's right on. And I teach a class like that, and my students tell me that after they've gone through that class, the ones who are interested in being entrepreneurs, they said they realize early on if the idea is any good. So
Exactly. And it's that
yeah,
acid test, right? It's that
yeah,
minimum viable product. Like, because
yeah.
people these days get so caught up in, oh, the website and the Instagram and the da 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 and all this stuff. It's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, just start doing some, like pay-per-click ads here. You'll know if something is going to take off and if it's not.
Can you share an example where refocusing on financial specifics helped turn around a struggling business?
Well, I could tell you where it helped turn my businesses around. I can give you examples of others. I think the biggest example is when like you don't just start jumping into your numbers, right? Unless there's an impetus for it. Some like your significant other is complaining or you feel like you're working every weekend and you don't have enough money to justify that. And so you start kind of poking around trying to figure out what's wrong. And I think the biggest thing to do is, which is why in the book I say, hey, deconstruct kind of 3 of your last projects or your last clients or products, is because when you drill down on kind of 3 typical scenarios, you realize A, the patterns, you realize, B, you spend a lot more than you think you do. And most importantly, which is kind of my key piece, is you realize how much time it takes. I go back to that customer acquisition piece, right? Entrepreneurs often can be very good at cost of goods sold. I'm going to make this dress. It's going to cost me $10. I'm going to sell it for 25, and then it's going to get marked up, blah, 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 because we focus on cost of goods sold. That's what we're trained in business school to focus on. What we need to be focused on is time. How much time, not the time of the seamstress that we've already got that put into the cost of goods sold formula, but our time. So once we drill down and focus on where does the entrepreneur spend their time with clients, which are the most profitable clients or market sectors, that's where the total turnaround becomes. Because when I did this exercise, I realized, okay, I'm going to figure out how much I'm making per hour. I was making less than $5 an hour. I realized, I could have been working at McDonald's. I would have been a lot happier at that point working at McDonald's, right? Because I would have had a shift meal. I would have had a 401k probably by that point. I wouldn't have had to go to McDonald's after every event because I was so hungry and exhausted. But you realize when you kind of do this dollars per hour thing and you realize I'm making less than any housekeeper in any third world country, you have to have a come to Jesus and say, do I want to keep doing this? Can I keep doing this? And if I do want to keep doing this, how do I pivot? And it's in dissecting those numbers, because often it is so much simpler than it seems. Often it's just stop working with these clients who are sucking all your time and attention, right? And more narrowly focus your target market. Or instead of a shotgun approach to, I market to dentists and doctors and homemakers, and you just go, I market to dentists. I mean, I know one guy whose company, I still can't believe it. He has this whole market division that is just towards dentists, because he's like, they're educated. Will spend money to market their businesses. They're all these components. So he's just stopped marketing to all these other people that, quote, should be the ones that would want to use their product.
It's so funny you should say that. I worked with somebody who had a marijuana business in Florida, and they couldn't understand why they were losing money. And it turned out it's the old 80-20 rule. And they were wasting a lot of time selling to a certain group of people.
Yep.
And I said, if they order from you, great, but don't waste any of your salespeople time on this. And now all of a sudden, a year later, they were profitable from doing that. What practical steps can entrepreneurs take to gain financial longitude and latitude in their business operations?
So, well, first, let me tell you what I mean by longitude and latitude, because that's one of my favorite things to say. And I say longitude and latitude because it's a precise position on the map, right? It is, and what I find is that, an entrepreneur will say, I want X amount of sales, or I want, but you need X amount of sales with X amount of profit margin and X amount of hours a week you're willing to work. There are other components, right? It isn't just this one random number. And I want entrepreneurs to realize where exactly they are in their businesses and what the issues are that keep them up at night. That's their longitude and latitude. And it is going to be different for every single entrepreneur. And so that's why you have to focus on where you are. But most importantly, well, I shouldn't say most importantly, equally importantly, where do you want to go? So I can say, oh, it's very simple. I want to go to New York. Okay, well, there's a lot of ways you can get to New York. You can fly to New York. You could take a train. You could, oh, but wait, where are you coming from? Right? So if I'm in Los Angeles going to New York, it's going to be a very different process than if I'm coming from Hanoi, right? But I have to know where I am right now. So I can say with drive-by business advice, oh, everybody should just do this. Well, maybe like, oh, everybody should do pay-per-click advertising. Everybody should do, well, I don't know. I mean, is your target audience in that, social media platform? There's so many things you have to figure out where exactly you are, and then where exactly do you want to go? Come up with the means to get there. And effectively those become your strategies from which to choose. And then you say, hey, listen, yeah, I'm going to fly because I need to get there tomorrow. Or, I'm going to take a train because I want to just see the country and I, want to chill out. Very different paths or plans depending on what the ultimate outcome is.
How can business owners effectively meet with themselves to evaluate financial health regularly. I always tell people they should know exactly how much they have in
Yes.
their bank account
Yep.
at all times.
Yes. I agree 100%. And the reason for that, I think, is because it's just discipline. In business, you just have to have discipline. And listen, we all stray from and then have to come back to it, usually because we're like, oh man, I've got to make the mortgage or I've got to make the property tax payments and it's not looking so good. So the I say you have to make those appointments with yourself. It's the whole Michael Gerber thing. You've got to work on your business, not just in it, period. You have to set a certain amount of time where you are every week looking at your numbers. And maybe you set aside you set aside an hour and you only get to it for 10 minutes. But it's just the discipline of showing up. And the one thing I say for any other ADHD entrepreneurs out there, and statistically there are a ton of them, is pick a time when your brain is in good shape, you're in good shape, you're not tired, hungry, annoyed. Like for me, I have to have worked out. I do it in the morning. My brain is fresh. I'm not already kind of, oh, it's 9 o'clock at night. I don't work very well. I'm tired. Everything's going to annoy me. If I set that appointment with myself, jump in, do it, sort of have this little financial review I do, then you move on. And then guess what? You can forget about it. Because if you don't do that, the one thing you won't do is forget about it. You'll spend all of your waking time going, why am I not making enough money? Why am I not, so just schedule the time with yourself and knock it out.
No question about it. In chapter 4, you talk about job costing and coding your way
Yeah,
to cash. Could you explain how job costing acts as a life raft
sure.
for small businesses?
Yes, because I go back to in small biz when you're a small business, it's that whole thing is it's like getting on a camel. You're 1 second you're on the ground, the next thing you go, oh, I can ride this camel. It's a big deal. I ride horses, and then first time you get on a camel, it's like whoop and up you go, and then your life is never the same. And I think of it like that riptide. There's so many distractions, and those distractions are only going to continue to get worse with social media, et cetera, et cetera. So the reason I say it's a life raft, it's a calm in the storm. You say to yourself, take these 3 projects. Ask yourself, how much was, if it's a, article of clothing, how much was the zipper? How much was the material? How much was the thread? And the reason that this is important to get so granular, I cannot tell you the number of entrepreneurs who have successful businesses. And then I will coach them. And then I'll say, okay, so what are your costs of goods sold? And let's say they're very savvy and they actually know them. And they'll say, here's my spreadsheet. The zipper costs this costs. And I say, okay, great. And I say, well, how are you, who are you going to sell to? They're going to sell, B2C. Great. Okay. So I see this is the cost of goods sold you sure you got everything? Yes. Absolutely sure. Listen, I've done this. I've looked at my account and whatever. I say, okay, great. So what kind of box are you shipping that in? Well, I'm just going to get the box from Uline or whatever. It's going to cost 25. It's not a big deal. I say, okay. Are you going to wrap it in any kind of plastic? Well, yeah, but that's like 10 cents. That's not that big a deal. You're going to have a sticker on it. You're going to have mailing instructions. You're going to have a
You get
return
all
thing.
the details.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then all these things that are, quote, not a big deal. I was like, the not a big deals are what puts companies out of business. And does it mean
100%.
that, oh my gosh, I forgot to include those, so I'm not going to be successful? No, it just means you have to then say, wow, I'm not at 30%, or you just say I'm at 28, or can you squeak out an extra little something, it's all in the discipline of the exercise. Because and then let's say you go to get investors, right? Somebody's going to invest in your company and they're like, holy cow, this girl is putting 3 cents for this label, 3 cents for, I one time showed somebody some numbers I had run, and they said, my God, you could build a B-2 bomber with this level of detail. And I said, yeah, because I want to know what I'm doing. And then because what happens, right? When something happens, you don't have enough money in your savings account. You don't have enough. It's because that, quote, whatever happened. So I call those expenses forget-me-nots. It's well, for an event, oh yeah, the linens are just $20 and we're going to rent them to a client for $30, until you realize, Well, that's as long as you ordered them 2 weeks before the event. If not, you got a rush surcharge. Oh, whoops, the assistant forgot to put shipping in there. Well, I mean, shipping can be as much as the product, right? So that's why I say it's a life raft. It's when you know you have accounted for every single thing, even if the news is bad, you're almost there because now you can just spend your time fixing the problem.
That's why I loved your book, because I do exactly this. I just did 14 different entrepreneurs' financial models,
Yep.
and they had no idea. I mean, I
Right.
even said to them, "How long does it take you to drive to the supermarket?" And
Exactly.
yeah,
Right?
and I price all that in,
Yes.
and they're like, "I had no idea this level of detail." I once raised $3.2 billion for. I started something called reverse factoring,
Yep.
and three major folks on Wall Street invest in this, and
Yeah.
they said they just invested on the spreadsheet. They said they never saw so
Right.
much detail.
Right.
They said if you're missing something, then you're missing something, but we can't tell because literally, just like you said,
Right.
every yeah,
And
it
and
made
and
all the difference.
it makes all the difference. But again, it goes back to like, what do people invest in, right? They invest in the
Yeah,
people and they invest in the idea and the size of the market and all this stuff, but they invest in the person. It's like, listen, I mean, I always say, there isn't a nickel I wouldn't pick up on a dirty New York street. I mean, it's like, if
right.
it's there, I'm after it, right? And when
Yeah,
when you have that level of detail, it goes into everything else. Like people come into our event planning warehouse, it's almost 6,000 square feet. And they always say the same thing. They're like, oh my God, this is so organized. I'm like, yes, I run a very tight ship because if all those containers aren't labeled with quantity 7 apple green linens and I book 8 for a client, guess what? I'm sending somebody to go find fabric that's not going to match. I'm going to have extra ones made. I mean, right? My profit margin just went completely south. So it is all in those details. But the nice kind of the comforting thing is you do that in the beginning and then it becomes second nature, right? Like now I just kind of naturally, if I wanted to price something in my head, let's say we were going to sell a new, I don't know, pillow. I mean, we don't sell pillows, but if I were going to do that, I'd kind of be able to be like, okay, it's going to be this, it's going to be this. I'm going to add X amount for the packaging, et cetera, et cetera. You can kind of do a little more quick and dirty, but you have to train yourself to do that so that your default is to say, are you going to pay this, the machine to weigh it? And I mean, last time I checked, you pay not just for the postage, but the thing for the machine every month, et cetera, et cetera. And you factor that in.
I just love hearing all of this. And that's why the book was amazing.
Thank you.
Because I've had so many people write entrepreneurial books and they've been good,
Right.
but but it's like you're lacking the level of detail that you really need to understand. Because I do financial models for my students.
Right.
And I said, you really need to know this. And I said, if you
Right.
go in front of investors and you can answer to this level of detail, they'll write the
Exactly.
check.
Well, and then here's the other thing. What I always say to new entrepreneurs, I say is watch Shark Tank, not just one episode. I say you binge watch Shark Tank
Yeah.
multiple episodes at a time. And the reason I say this is because it boils down to a formula. Every time they will say, what are your sales? What are your margins? How long have you been at it? What's your customer acquisition cost? Do you own the intellectual property? If that's one of the things, they're going to want to go to, and the people that they invest in are the ones who are like, yes, 32% with this, with customer acquisition rate of blah, 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 because then the sharks go, oh, okay, this person knows what they're doing. But as soon as it's such a cliche, but they smell blood in the water. As soon as the person is not exactly sure, then they just go, I'm out because they are like, I don't want to have to babysit this person.
Yeah, I even tell all my students, I said, forget about gross margins. They're meaningless.
Yeah.
All you're worried about is what the net profit is at the end of
Right.
the day. You
Right.
telling me that you have an 80% gross margin, and then
Right.
I factor in marketing and all the other stuff,
Right.
and now we're down to 8%.
Right.
It's a meaningless number. Here's a
Yep.
question from the audience. In
Okay.
my In my field, timelines are long. R&D costs are high and revenue may be years away. How
Mhm.
can a biotech firms apply the discipline of tracking true cost and margins, just as a service business must, to ensure they are actually building toward profitability, not just burning through investment capital?
Well, I think that's terrific. And right now, and I love that this comes up because right now I have this whole product I'm doing, which is very outside of my comfort zone that prevents the spread of wildfires, right? And it is so talk about R&D for years, et cetera, et cetera. And it is a different challenge because you it isn't like you can pivot quickly, and you just start going, God, this is costing so much. Where is it all going? And so I
Yeah.
think but in some ways it's easier, right? In some ways you just set up whether it's your QuickBooks or whatever accounting system, and you just say to yourself, you make decisions early on. X amount is going to go to R&D. X amount I'm going to consider would be cost of goods sold. And you start sort of building the product even though you're years away from building it. It's like you do your business plan so that you know what your costs are, and then you're kind of mocking it up the whole time, right? And then but within that, which is so important, is the time component. You know, it's one thing if you think you're going to have, just like we talked about, this gross margin, but as you're building it, you start to see, and you're like, this test is supposed to, we've allotted this test, one person can run 80 tests an hour. I'm making that up. And you realize, holy cow, not only can one person not run 80 tests an hour, one person can't run 80 tests a day. So that's where you start seeing. So I always say kind of like, how far off are you? If you're within striking distance, you're like, our goal is one person to be able to run 80 tests a day. And you're kind of at the very beginning, one person can run 30. Okay, I mean that's reasonable, but it's you just start measuring something, and that's what I always tell people. Just start. That's why I say with the subscriptions, just start with something. So with R&D, just start with any metric. How much time is this person supposed to run the blood on the machine? How much time is it supposed to? What's the lead time to go from putting this in to getting this result? What's the package? If you know that you're shipping some kind of machine that has to go with your biotech invention or whatever, like if it's 10,000 pounds, and it just start measuring something, and that will inform your decisions. And it'll also feel like, again, like you have a life raft, like you aren't just blowing something for God knows what reason.
In chapter 5, let the fun begin, setting up a coding system.
Yeah.
What tips do you have for small business owners to create an effective coding system for finances?
What I do is first say, come up with the basic ones, right? Like, okay, your cost of goods sold, and really understand what your cost of goods sold are. And then when you think you understand it, then re-listen to this podcast and say, did you get the labels? Did you get all that kind of stuff? So first I say that is determine what are going to be in your cost of goods sold, and then determine what are absolutely not going to be your cost of goods sold. They're going to be, your the let's say the manager of the factory, right? So it's not going to be the per piece, but it's going to be, this is what you're going to divide all of it across the board. And I think those early distinctions of what is going to be cost of goods sold and what's going to be a general expense, and then continuing to plug it all in, and then after a month or a couple weeks you run your P&L, and then you start going, you know what, that really is not cost of goods sold. It's really got to be below the line. It's got to be an expense. I think, again, just those exercises of putting a stake in the ground. And then what I always tell my team is, you can't have it both ways. The cost of goods sold, to me, and an expense, they're mutually exclusive, right? So I don't want to see a profit and loss statement for an event, and I see some of this stuff is like, oh, this is cost of goods sold, and some of it's like, no. I want to see it, allocate it to the project. And my litmus test for that is, would I have spent the money or spent the time if it weren't for this project? So one of the things I do that not everybody agrees with, but if I go to the flower market for an event and I get a parking ticket, to me, that parking ticket goes as part of that cost of goods sold. Why? Or that P&L. Because
Yeah,
I wouldn't have gotten the parking ticket if I hadn't gone for that event. Right now, if I'm
right.
going to do it for 3 events, it's going to get across 3 events. But I need to know that in reality, people get parking tickets, and that has to be taken out because in another event, it's going to be something else.
What are some of the overlooked costs that can significantly affect profitability? And you just started talking about that just now.
Yeah, I mean, there it's on and on. It's well, obviously subscriptions. I mean, subscriptions these days will kill you because that's where everybody's burying everything. And then subscriptions that go up and you get these emails and it used to be you get the privacy notice. Oh, you need to know that our privacy and so you just kind of go, okay, okay, okay. And the next thing you know, you look at your credit card and you're like, wait, I signed up for that when it's $2.99 a month. It was a filter app for my phone. Now it's X amount. The other thing that to me that massively erodes profitability is signing up for an annual subscription. I mean, I almost never will sign up for an annual subscription unless it is a product or service, something that I have used continuously. Here's why, because you pay, yeah, you get the quote discount, but A, they're using your money, right? Right then. And B, you can't cancel early. Whereas at least if you're month to month and you see a rough period coming, you can go, okay, listen, I can cut this stuff or I can pause it or whatever. So those are a couple things. Shipping, I think, is absolutely huge. And I think that's going to continue to be huge. Is shipping, tariffs, obviously. Depending on where you are, like in California, labor, we've got all these, we're just constantly subject to, oh, you're going to have this tax on this tax on that. And then just the places in which you do business, right? There's a reason so many companies are leaving California and going to tax friendlier places. So do I think everybody should leave California? No. Do I think you should know the difference between doing business in California versus doing business in Texas? Yes. And then you can adjust accordingly. But I really think the big thing is at the end of the day is time. We just totally underestimate how much time it takes to call a customer back, follow up, close the deal, as you say, drive to the supermarket. I mean, I think there isn't an entrepreneur out there that I think should be getting their own gas or washing their own cars. I mean, you got to focus on your important work and all that other garbage gets delegated.
I can't begin to tell you how I keep telling all these entrepreneurs I'm working with exactly that because they're losing so much money
Oh,
doing so many of these different things. I outsourced to 3 virtual assistants
mm-hmm.
in the Philippines
Yep.
to do all types of different
Yep.
work for me because it's much more cost effective and
Oh,
I can worry about work on other things that
completely.
yeah, so that's where it makes sense. How do B cost, especially those related to time management, impact the bottom line?
Well, they impact it tremendously because if you think about it, and you've got okay, so I oversee my dad's medical practice, some of the aspects of it with let's say billing and collections, right? Well, that's a time thing. So you're going to have a collector who's going to follow up on old stuff. Well, one of the first things I do when I'm trying to get my arms around something and figuring out where things are going awry or why something is costing what it's costing, I just start, as I say, I start measuring something. And you just start measuring, well, how many, calls is the collector making in an hour? How long, how many people can they reach out to? How many follow-up emails are they spending? How many can they do in an hour? What's the lead time from when they start putting all those components together to actually settling the file and getting a percentage. And then you start tracking those things and you realize, wow, there are big differences between time and people doing different things. We think there isn't, right? We think, oh, this person's on the assembly line and this person's on the assembly line. But when you get into real business and it's things like collections or accounting or things like that, and you realize, sometimes you just say to yourself, my God, why does it take that person so long? Well, when you start tracking the time and measuring it, you realize that a good person a good person in the role should be able to do, one case in X amount of time. Like you just come up with some metric. And when you start measuring everybody against that, that's when you can make fabulous decisions in your business, right? Because then you realize, God, the numbers are so different. and it's ultimately costing you a lot of money. And then maybe you just realize, my God, because this person is chatting with them, so long on the phone. Well, maybe that person is better at the front end. Maybe they're better in customer service or sales or something else, instead of something that needs a much, tighter time frame. But time, it costs us so much, right? How much do you hear about labor costs and minimum wage and taxes on top of it, and not blah, 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 blah. And we're just not very good at measuring it, especially for ourselves.
No question. What advice do you have for entrepreneurs to better track and value their time in their business?
Well, that's very simple. You take a time tracking app, or for people like, oh, I'm not that technical, I'm not that whatever. Then you just write it down on a piece of paper. You write it down in the notes section of your phone, and you just pretend you are a lawyer who is billing in increments. And so you just in the very beginning, you say, okay, it's 9 to 9:30, and even if you're not writing it down that second what you're doing, then at 9:30 you say, what did I just do? And you go, okay, I talked to 4 clients, I wrote 1 proposal, I researched X amount, and you break down that time. And then what you do is you do that for a week, and you see the patterns, and it'll blow your mind. You will realize, I can take somebody's time tracking list, a sheet, for a week, and I can tell them exactly what the problem is in their business, because it's like we talked about in the very beginning of the show, right? You look at it and the pattern emerges just when you write things down. That's the first step.
Yeah, I had a woman that I helped. She had a beauty salon,
Yeah.
and we tracked all the hours in the week. And it turned out that she was spending so much time with her boyfriend that she was
Right.
essentially giving up $70,000 a
Yeah.
year in the fact that she wasn't billing.
Yep.
And she had other people in other chairs, and they were making
Right.
money. And I said, okay, if you added 5 more hours on a week, this is what
Right.
you'd make. And if you actually added 40 hours on more
Right.
in a week,
Right.
this is how much you'd make in a year. But you would have 1.5 million in 10 years.
Yes.
And she was like, oh my God. So I said, he's a 1.5 million boyfriend. Is he
Right.
worth
That's
1.5 million?
exactly what I'd be saying to myself. I mean, yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, yeah, that's how I quantify everything. And, some of us get in trouble for that. But yeah, and the point is not to say ditch the boyfriend, but the point is to say, realize that if you're just kind of hanging out on the couch and you're not doing something that important, could you substitute some of
That's
those
exactly,
hours? That's all it
yeah.
is.
That's exactly what it was for her.
Yeah.
And it was a real wake-up call for her because she had no idea she was giving up so much
Yep.
money.
Yep.
In chapter 8, we spent how much? So what are some of the strategies to gain clarity on seed cost and prevent overspending? And you've been talking about that for most of the hour here.
Right. You start writing it down. And even if you don't, even if you say, I don't know, what's the cost of goods sold? What's of this? What's of that? Just start writing things down. Just take an invoice that says you had 100 zippers, right? And then you had shipping on it, and divide that by 100. And you start writing it down. You just start building a model. And the numbers in front of you will start guiding your path. I promise you. Something will just go, oh, and it'll send you down a rabbit hole that will then start to solve your problem. But the biggest thing I find with entrepreneurs is we get overwhelmed, and we think we can't, oh my gosh, I don't know where to start. So the answer is just start somewhere and write it down somehow, and keep showing up to do it, and the path will emerge.
So what are the 3 big questions business owners should ask when evaluating their financial data?
Well, here's the thing. So many, everybody, we talk, the book is called, But Are You Making Any Money? My dad is always asking me, but are you making any money? We always think we're not making enough money. People forget that. I think so many entrepreneurs think, oh, I've got to acquire another company, or I've got to do this other product line, or I've got to, there are a lot of ways to make money, right? And the big 3 questions are, you know, can I raise my prices? Like, keep something in mind. A lot changes if you just raise your prices. Now, I'm not saying you can say the coffee was $5 and now the coffee is $6, right? But there's semantics with it. And then you get into neuroeconomics and all these other things that, we would lose bids when I'd write an event planning bid, right? And we would have food and beverages and all the stuff, line itemed out. Well, we would lose if somebody else came in to bid it, and their bottom line could even be more than ours. But we noticed that customers were looking at two things. They're always kind of comparing food costs, like what's she charging versus what are they charging food costs. So if we figured out what they were looking at, and the same thing they would do with centerpieces. And it was like a lot of other stuff kind of just got buried in there. So what we started doing is fine, make the food and the centerpieces the loss leader if that's what was going to get us the whole job, right? And then have other things that are not as price sensitive, or you add what we call installation and strike, where it's basically like a delivery and a setup fee and all these other things. Well, people didn't have an objection to that kind of thing. They had an very big objection to paying too much, what they thought was too much per person for food. They didn't when you change the semantics, right? Or we started changing things even on our proposal, like instead of putting a dollar sign before everything and the comma and the dot 00.97, we just started writing it as much shorter numbers. Well, the brain registers that as a lower number. So that's one thing. I mean, another thing is, can you cut your costs? You cut your costs, guess what? Your margins also just went up. And the next thing is, can you be more efficient? So if it takes an hour to do something, and all of a sudden it takes, with AI or something, it takes a half an hour to do something, guess what? You're still making more money. So all three of those ways are making more money without overcomplicating, without going out and trying to come up with the new product or the new revenue stream. It's like, no, just take what you've got right here in front of you, tighten that up, squeeze all the juice out of that orange, and then start looking for the next whatever it is you're going to focus on.
Yeah. How are you using AI now for your
God,
business?
I love it. I literally use it for everything. Sometimes I use it just to say, one of my catch-all questions with AI is I'll put something in there, and my daughter makes fun of me because she says that he's like, you talk to it like it's a real person, like you're like with perfect grammar and sentences. I'm like, yeah, because that's how I want it to spit out. But sometimes I'll just fact check myself, or I'll just say, hey, listen, I'm putting out an offer letter to this person, blah, blah, blah. This is the role they're going to do. This is what I'm putting in the offer letter. What am I for? And this is my catch-all question. What should I be asking you that I'm not? And it'll come back and be like, oh, that's a great offer letter, blah, blah, blah. However, you forgot to include sick days and vacation. So it might be something like that. I might use it to jumpstart my creativity. So I do a lot of TV segments for events and even for business stuff. Well, if in that world, it's very fast. So my publicist might text me, and Taylor Swift just got engaged, so this is a big, so she's texting me, oh no, we got to pitch them. What are your ideas for the Taylor Swift, blah blah blah, the album coming out? So sometimes I just use it to just kind of get me going. So I'll put in there about a prompt about Taylor Swift, like what's her deal with number 13? What's her deal with da da da? I've got it. And then I get a jumping off point. So I'm not trying to take AI and cut and paste it and create it into a business plan, but I will absolutely use it to say, hey, how can I tighten this up? How can it look better? How can it read better? How can it not be as wordy? So it's just endless how many things I use it for.
So I clearly, you like me love working.
Oh,
It's
I
not
love
really
it.
work.
No,
Yeah,
yeah,
I do too.
yeah.
And I work a ton of hours, but I don't feel like I'm working because
No,
I'm enjoying it so much.
yeah.
How many hours typically a week are you working? And what does work-life balance look like for you?
Okay, well, depending on who you ask. I feel like I'm sometimes just very lazy, and my kids will be like, you do not literally nothing but work. And I really
I
do
hear the same
work,
thing.
right? It's like if I'm in the bathtub, I'm still on my phone coming up with, I'm like, oh, that's a
Uh,
great thing for a newsletter. And I'm
yeah,
putting it on Pinterest, and I don't,
yeah.
I don't know. I guess I am probably, quote, working all the time. I'm not looking at spreadsheets all the time, right? I'm not writing pitch letters all the time, but my I'm absorbed with what I do, and I'm always looking for an angle. I can't shut that off. So for me, work-life balance is more about uh taking a break from having a lot of people around or a lot of meetings. My balance has to come in with, oh my gosh, I can't think anymore. Like I can't respond anymore. And for me, it's like going for a workout, a walk, taking a break. I a lot of times go on vacation by myself, with a lot of people find weird, but to me, that's the greatest gift on the planet is you're flying the phone. You can't be on the phone. You get there, you can always blame it on the time change. And you have, especially if you have kids, you've got about, 3 days or something where
How
nobody
many
is
kids
really
do you
looking for
have?
you. I have three.
And
So
any of them join you in the business?
It's at different points. They have the oldest one is 30. He was working with us for a while and actually has taken what he's learned and gone on. He's got a master's in economics. And the middle one is going to be a sophomore, or is a sophomore now in college. The youngest is a senior in high school. And especially with this whole wool fire thing, sustainability thing, I'm like, do you guys understand? I could pay you guys $1 million a year, like tomorrow, to do this. But you know what it's like when the shoemaker's kids go without clothes, I guess. I mean, they're just like, oh, okay, whatever. And
Yeah.
they want to work at the ice cream store. So I don't know.
Yes.
We'll see. I mean, my daughter's like, but I want a job at Handles. I'm like, what kind of crack is Handles selling that these kids are? She's like, well, you got a free pint of ice cream. I'm like, oh, you could buy 100 pints of ice cream. You don't even need that much ice cream, right? If you work for me. But so
I
I
hear you.
wish but I will tell you, I would love to manifest my daughter going to Vin University if I could. Gosh, because we're in the middle of the college stuff right now. And I think
Yeah,
that would
you
be
should definitely,
amazing. Oh,
we'll talk about that, but you
yeah,
should definitely send
I
her
would
here
love
because
that.
the experience
Oh,
and it's super safe. Like
yes.
and these Asian countries are the safest places in the
Yeah.
world to be
Yeah.
because there's no guns, bows and arrows, no weapons.
Right.
Even the
Right.
police don't carry weapons
Right.
here.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Well, I'm all about these different experiences. And I think that's when you learn the most. I mean, so boy, maybe when I told you I'm going to come in the fall. So I think maybe I'll take her with me.
absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. The book was amazing. Everything was great. And what's great is that you're so right about everything because you're talking from
Oh,
experience.
yes.
And
Yes.
that's what was great about it. So I thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
And I hope you'll write another book and that we will have you again.
I'm working on another one right now. It's called Whatever You Do, Don't Do This. Yeah. So,
And I love the titles.
yeah, because it's very like, it's kind of the laundry list of just stay away from all these things and you'll be very successful. So,
Everyone, thank you for listening today. Have a great Labor Day weekend. Take
great.
care.
Thanks, Mark.